do it now.
Perfect. Welcome in to the final pyramid ranking for the Avs season on Pucks and Prosecco, presented by Accurate America.
Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome.
Hey everybody, welcome into Pucks and Prosecco. Meghan, Angley, and Chloe Theil is back with us, and we've got a fun one planned today. I think we're getting better with the timing of these two to know that we just kind of have to dedicate the whole show to the pyramid.
Yeah, because before it would just be an hour, and then we'd end up, whoever was producing, it would be like an hour and a half, maybe an hour 45. The first one was for sure like an hour 45, and that was not good. But people enjoy watching them, at least I think. So,
and we have fun with them. I feel like this one's definitely going to be bittersweet because we've been waiting to rank the individual playoff performances of the Avs over the Dallas Avs series because it obviously didn't end very well.
Yeah.
So there are still some positives to take away from it, but a few negatives too. So I think in the past we've been really sweet, talking about how proud we are, clapping. There might be some harsher criticisms of some playoff performances today.
Yeah, I mean, it's harder when you're only looking through 7 games also. You have some players that barely played, like EJ, or like we were just saying, Scott Wedgwood. Can't really put him on the pyramid because he didn't do anything bad, but he just didn't play. So
yeah, that was our spoiler alert. We were going to make mention of Scott Wedgwood. He's not in the pyramid. He came in as relief in the playoffs, and he did a great job. But that was short-lived, not much to talk about. So he's not on our pyramid. He didn't do anything wrong. But a few of the guys not on our pyramid today, they didn't do a lot of things right. So that's going to be a little bit different for us.
Yes, I completely agree. Hopefully people agree for the most part. There's a few in here that I know Jesse wouldn't agree with, and that's why we kicked him out today. We told him that he wasn't allowed to
He's not even physically in the building, so he can't storm the set and complain with who we made number one.
So true. So hopefully he doesn't show up a little later and
lock
then
the
walk
door
in on set. Yeah, John, can you lock the door and make sure that Jesse doesn't come in here? We don't want him to ruin this.
Yeah, we've made a perfect pyramid. So no notes. Okay. I did want to start the show, though, with something you and I were talking about yesterday. It is unrelated to the pyramid, but it is related to drama, and that feels appropriate still. So Nazem Kadri, after the Mikko Rantanen hat trick in Game 1 in the Dallas Jets series for round 2, tweeted something that garnered a lot of traction online, and I wanted to talk about the drama of it with you.
I just need to know where this is coming from, because that's such a bold thing to go out and put something on Twitter. I mean, you don't see that very often, that an NHL player goes out and tweets something like that. So I need to know what it came from. He needs to add context.
I love that he didn't add context so that we could wildly speculate and read into this perhaps a little too much. So he tweeted, rule number 1, you always keep the dogs. #96. And it's interesting coming from Kadri as a player who the conversation around him not extending in Colorado was very matter of fact. It was never presented as this point of contention. They couldn't agree on a number despite negotiations. It was just kind of understood at the end of that year that he was going to command way too much money than the Avs could afford to invest at the 2C position, especially at that time. I think with the cap going up, maybe that conversation would have been different if the Avs were having it today, but it certainly wasn't one they could even really entertain with Kadri at the time. So it's easy for me to want to start speculating around how those conversations may be leading up to his decision to just go into the open market and see where he could get the most bang for his buck. But I don't know. It still feels like two entirely different things with Rantanen. There was a stronger belief that he was going to be extended. I think internally there was a stronger belief
that's very true
on the Avs side that this was going to get done. And so it still feels like salt in an open wound for a lot of Avs fans to see this because they didn't want Mikko Rantanen to no longer be a member of the Colorado Avalanche. They would have loved to keep the dogs together. But goodness, I think this reads to me as a teammate who loved playing with Rantanen. Like, he is very lovable. I think that's why you see the reaction in the handshake line that you do between his former teammates. And I think this is just saying, you know, they didn't fully recognize your value, King.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I kind of take from it too, is he's just basically saying, here's an example of two players that, you know, had significant production for the Avs that were eventually traded. So I don't know how much was meant by it. I surely don't hope that he's saying anything like the front office and him couldn't come to an agreement like that. I hope that's not the way that that went down. And you just never know. Like, maybe with the Rantanen deal, it was just more widely reported. More people knew about what was going on internally than they did with Kadri. So yeah, I'm not sure what it means, but super interesting. And it just adds a little spice.
It added a lot of spice, and I am here for it because I can relate to a feeling of leaving a place of employment that didn't value you, and then just sort of looking at that person go on to find success and feeling like, you know what, they didn't see your value.
Yeah.
They have to experience the consequence of not fully seeing your value.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that he has any ill will directed at current members of the Avalanche, like former teammates Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar.
And I know that that's not the other player's fault too. Like, when that situation happens, it happens with the front office. It doesn't happen with your teammates. But the other thing that we mentioned to each other was, if he did sign an extension, wouldn't that directly lead to Mikko not being able to sign an extension?
Yeah, I mean, let's pretend there was a world where it could have been the 7x7. I don't know, even with the cap going up a little bit, now that we have clarity around Landeskog, there's a lot of what ifs I'm operating off of here. But yeah, this would have impacted their ability to extend Mikko, which even in the absence of a Nazem Kadri contract, they couldn't do. So you're right. It probably would have directly impacted their ability to also extend Mikko, and you'd be short one dog in that scenario. So you still had to choose between the dogs at the end of the day.
Right. But you lost 2 dogs, supposedly. You still have 1 dog, the Nate dog.
The Nate dog.
Which is the official dog. I don't know where Kadri got that him and Mikko were dogs. I'm not sure.
Yeah. But I guess it's a dog-eat-dog world, and we're going to spare no feelings. I'm just kidding. Most of this pyramid's pretty positive. It's who's not on it that starts to get a little bit negative. But I guess we can dig right in. Actually, no, pause. I haven't had a chance to sit with you and unpack your feelings around the Avs exit. I'm sorry if this is stirring it up, but I did still want to hear your take on how you've been doing the last couple of weeks.
Weeks. Yeah, I guess it has been almost 2 weeks.
Almost 2 weeks.
It feels a lot longer. It's just it's a disappointing way to finish the season, and especially in that game 7, them being up. And I was starting to feel pretty comfortable when they were up in that game, and I was thinking, wow, we can really do this. This can be the year that make it past Dallas. Probably going to play Winnipeg, which was another fun series, that the end to that one. So yeah, it was just disappointing. I didn't enjoy the way it ended. It was the worst part to me was listening to what Gabe had to say after, because everybody thought that when he would make his return that they would end up making a deep run and they would do it for him. And that's just not what happened. And he kind of mentioned in there, like, he just wasn't ready to be done playing, which makes a ton of sense. When did he go in? Game 3? He started game 3. So he played 4 games. And so that's just an unfortunate way to end the season, coming back like that and then having to spend the next 3 months in the off season. So I wish it could have come together a little bit better for him. But otherwise, other than it being disappointing, it's just there's nothing really you can do about it. You just have to get back and figure out where it went wrong.
I found Gabe's post-game really sad too, because
Yeah.
it's a man who always knows what to say to kind of keep some optimism, that door open for optimism. And it was so matter of fact.
Yeah.
Like, and now it's done.
Yep.
And that's that.
I remember.
And I respect that. Like
that. I was like, gosh, what a harsh way to just end your interview like that.
It's
and
harsh.
I have to clip this. Like, this is so upsetting. Yeah, it was a harsh way to end it.
It's cutting, and I don't blame them. That is such a raw environment. The post game following a Game 7 loss when you had a 2-0 lead in the third. I don't blame any of the players for having the post game that they did.
Yeah.
MacKinnon included.
Yeah.
I know that there was a lot of emotion worn a bit differently by each player there, but I wouldn't have expected a different reaction.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's just kind of how I felt too. You just really have nothing to say. Like, as much as you want to, find something to blame, as soon as it ended, it was just kind of like, well, there's a lot of things that could have gone wrong this series, and like, we have to take responsibility for the way that this went down.
Yeah.
And there can be people that blame it on the refs or on injury, anything like that, maybe. But when you listen to what Nate said, that's when it's just a little rough, because he's right. They're missing two of their best players, and they still couldn't do it. Like, what can they possibly do to get that done if it's not in this postseason?
Have they considered black magic? That's
yes. Where's the amulet?
I'm not sure that Dallas didn't dabble in some black magic of their own. I'm just kidding. But I'm going to put you in the hot seat while I open the Prosecco and pour us a glass.
Okay.
But did you have any feelings about personnel changes that they should have made, that they did make, and letting go Ray Bennett?
Truly, I don't. So here's what I will say. There was a lot of talk about firing Jared Bednar. I think they made the right choice in not firing him. I don't think that throughout this postseason there was much he could have done differently to beat Dallas. Because it just comes to a certain point where you're looking at head coaching, but you're also looking at player performance. And I just think the player performance wasn't there. And I do think a big part of it was the power play. And they decided to let go of Ray Bennett. I think that was the right choice to make if they wanted to make a change, if they wanted the power play to look different. But I don't think that firing Jared Bednar in any way would have solved anything for this team.
Okay. I agree, but I know that it was kind of a widely held opinion around here that we didn't feel that way. Okay, well, I guess we can start digging into some of these individual playoff performances then, because a lot of our summer conversation is going to revolve around what this team will look like next year and should look like next year.
Yeah.
And some of that involves, who do you run it back with? Who did some of the right things in what was a really difficult series? I sound like a broken record, but there are a lot of things that the Avs did right process-wise. And analytically, 5v5, this reflected that. Special teams cost them in a big way. So the power play shutout is definitely going to be related to the conversation today, too, because you just have some of the most elite players on both units, but especially that top unit.
Yep. And
failing to perform on the power play is a huge reason they didn't advance.
Yeah.
And you look at this Jets-Dallas series, and don't you just feel like this Avs team, exactly how we're talking about them right now, probably would have made easy work of Winnipeg?
Yes. 100%. I agree with that. And that's how I felt even just starting off against Dallas. I don't remember if I said it on a show or if I just said this to you or Jesse. I thought that Dallas would have been their hardest matchup.
Yeah.
Everybody else that they would have faced after that, I don't think would have been as hard as Dallas. I mean, in the final, of course,
right,
it's going to be difficult. Like that's probably right there, but there's just something about them playing Dallas and the way that these two teams compete against each other. It's It's hard.
It is hard. It's like they are the antidote to everything that the Avs pose a lethal threat in.
Yeah.
And I think there are answers to some of these problems too. And some of them include just be better. Better execution. So let's start at the bottom of our pyramid and work our way up to some of the more positive topics of conversation.
All right. Number 15. Dun, dun.
Ryan Lindgren.
Look at that stash.
Look at that stash. Maybe, I don't think he had that stash. I mean, he had a beard stash.
He had a beard,
combo,
yes.
Probably.
But he didn't shave it going into playoffs.
Yeah, I wish he would have.
He wasn't
maybe...
baby-faced.
Oh. Anyways, the mustache or the absence of it might have been part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan Lindgren, to me, okay, my big picture view of the Avs on the whole is they needed their best players to be their best, and they needed some of these guys that they brought in to also be at their best. And they didn't even get a great version of the players, they just got an okay version. And so Ryan Lindgren, to me, had an okay playoffs, but you had too many guys who were just okay. And so he picks up 3 points along the way. Now, he led the team in blocks, or close to it, 12 blocks, 13 hits. He established himself at the net front. I think he was exposed a little bit on the back check, getting beat with speed at times on behalf of Dallas. And it's also not billed as a strength of his skating and his speed specifically, though I think it was exposed a little bit as a weakness in the series. A couple of tough moments on the kill from him too, from my perspective, but he also came up with some pretty timely blocks on the kill. So some tough moments in his own end, though. I think that his lane management stood out, especially with respect to the blocks, as a strength of his game and helping them in that way. He just didn't do as much as I would have liked to help them more. Not that it was his sole job or responsibility, but that's why he's at the bottom of our pyramid.
We didn't move him from the last pyramid. He was right at 15. So take with that what you will. But one of the things I did want to say, I looked at what his points look like through the playoffs. He matched his total from last year at 3. This was in 7 games with the Avs. Last year was in 16 with the Rangers. So I do think that's a pretty great production from a third pairing defenseman in your first season with a new team. So I agree. I don't think he did as much as he probably could have, but I think for where he was at, I think he did a pretty good job. So I think 15 makes the most sense for where he is.
Interested in him being with the Avs? Remove the contract conversation because he is one of their UFAs. Would you have some interest in him being on the team next year? Pretend the contract's really agreeable, but not like team friendly agreeable, just very normal. He's not taking a huge discount, but it's a really average market value.
I'd have interest. I think he's consistent, and I think that's what they need. Unless they find somebody that would fit there a lot better, I don't see why they wouldn't want to re-sign him if it was an agreeable contract.
I agree, by the way. I think that he had up huge minutes on the kill for them, and that isn't something I want to take too lightly.
And I like his personality. He just seems like a head down grit kind of guy.
Yeah,
I think that's really interesting.
He really is, and he is a warrior for them. And so, you know, I talked about this on the show with Jesse, like his physicality isn't quite the same as Manson's, but he is competitive and he will put his body on the line to come up with some of those sacrificial blocks. And I respect that about him a lot.
How tall is he? Now that I'm thinking about this.
Not huge. I think, all right, just guessing, 6 foot.
Yes.
But having stood by him, we're in the like 5'11" territory.
Interesting. Yeah, he's 6 foot. Interesting.
All right. Well,
without knowing that, I would think he'd be smaller also. Because I was kind of thinking 5'10", 5'11".
We respect short kings on this podcast.
We do.
Too. I want to make that very clear. This is not taking away from him at all. All right, next guy.
All right. Number 14.
I love this picture of Jack Drury.
There's, you know what? There's so many I could have picked, and I can't tell you why I went with this one.
I love it so much. He
I
looks
just
like
thought he looked
a
hardcore.
little baby bird who just woke up from a nap. And I want to throw some respect on
He's
this
got some
man's
bed
name.
head.
Yeah, I want to throw some respect on his name though, because he's near the bottom of the pyramid, but I liked his playoffs. Look, there's a tough penalty late in Game 7 that I think will be front of mind for a lot of people. I'm going to use a little profanity on this show. I'm not going to get carried away, but that line took a lot of shit.
Yeah.
Jack Drury included. And he just kind of absorbed it. He was really resilient in that sense. But his entire line, the possession numbers, one huge driver of that was Parker Kelly throwing the body around every shift.
Mhm.
But Drury and OC were right there with him. And he had the best face-off win percentage on the team, the second best in the defensive zone. He was really reliable at the dot. And they needed that down the middle. And honestly, all of the centermen, save for MacKinnon at times, really stepped up and were stable in that sense. But Jack Drury came out of the regular season one of the best face-off guys and continued to be that for them. And so I thought the heart that he competed with and the shit that he had to take, I really liked Jack Drury in this series. And I think of him as a young player still with, you know, more in his ceiling to achieve in Colorado, and he's another year to do it. So this is a player that I'm glad will be running it back with the Avs next year. They found something good with that fourth line that I'd like to keep seeing.
Yeah, I think he's a great 4C. I think he was fantastic on that line. Exactly what you brought up. He dealt with the physicality of Dallas, and he was going up against, is it Bichelle or is it Bichel? Or Bichel.
Now that you say it out loud, I'm like,
every time I say it, I say it differently. We'll say it's Bichel. I mean, you're looking at he's 6'6". Huge. Yeah, he's
big
huge
guy
next to Drury. And the way that he was able to deal with that, even, you know, when he got taken out from under him, when he had the two Dallas players lifting him off the ground and dropping him down.
Bananas.
I think for him being as young as he is, I think he did a fantastic job this series. And I would be super interested in him staying with Colorado because I just think he fits really, really well there. And I agree. There's more that he can do with this team.
I agree. 6'7". Woo, boy.
6'7".
That's a big dude.
That's basically how tall I am, if anybody's wondering.
That's amazing.
Okay. Next.
This is hard.
I know.
Did he almost not make your 15?
Like, when I was thinking about it, did I think of not including him?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. That's fair. There's a part of me who, in good faith, was like, I'm not sure I can even endorse him in the pyramid, which is incredibly dramatic, you guys. But it's because in going through the numbers, too, there are things that he did well in this series. You know, from the points perspective, I think everybody left you wanting outside of Nathan MacKinnon, but he was among the top points producers for the Avs. So it's like, okay, well, I can't fully discount that. But he had the second highest missed shot volume on the team behind Cale Makar at 15. But he was third on the team in high danger chances for in all situations at 42. And so I boil down his series to weird decisions with the puck. There were flashes of skill and speed, but the lack of execution neutralized the skill and the speed that we saw. And then also simultaneously, he dished some big hits, and that was great, but also just a little bit weird. It's like, we just needed you to be a little more of who you normally are and a little less of this guy you're trying to be in response to feedback that you've probably gotten about how to have success in the playoffs.
Did you say yesterday that he led the team in hits?
He didn't lead in hits, but he was one of the top hitters.
I wasn't sure.
Game by game. And it was Parker Kelly who came away with the lead in hits.
Yeah, of course,
Our guy PK.
PK
but Netchus was weirdly among the team high on a nightly basis. And don't get me wrong, big hits absolutely had a place in this series. It was a heavy Dallas team. It required it. And so I'm not mad at Netchus over this. I just feel like his focus was needed on other parts of his game, namely the execution. And it's not a problem exclusive to him in any way. I just think that it neutralized his impact to struggle with execution the way that he did. And So he fought the puck at times. And Jesse talked about this, but he was a little more of a perimeter player, and that was by design. That was what Dallas wanted. But this is such an elite skater in traffic that I wanted to see him play to his strengths a little bit more.
Yeah. This was a hard one for me too, because you're right. It's hard looking at their point production and then saying, well, that's not great. Like, even though it looks good to have 5 points in 7 games, he still didn't look great. And I just think back to when he first was traded and what he was doing for the team and the way that he looked and the way he was connecting with Nate and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm just wondering what happened. Because, I mean,
Black magic.
Dallas Black
was
Magic, of course. Yeah. But, you know, I always just try to give the benefit of the doubt of, you know, this was his first playoff run ever away from Carolina. And maybe it just took some getting used to. Maybe it was just played differently than he's used to. But if you're playing on the first line for the Avs, then you kind of have to get over that.
I think some of the comments too, I do want to see a full year of Marty Necas under Bednar's system and evaluate the player at the end of that, because I do think some of what Necas seemed to struggle with was how does he embody the type of player that Jared Bednar wants him to be and reconcile it with the type of player that he is naturally, the high skill player. And I think that he can merge these two identities together with a little bit of time, because he's still an important entry tool for the Avs as an option outside of Nathan MacKinnon, and his speed did beat Dallas at times. And so that was a great part in the bottom line of the Avs being able to at times beat Dallas using their speed. Marty Necas is absolutely at the top of that list as to why that even happens in the first place. So just kind of confusing in how to talk about him, because he's low in this list because, yeah, you're right, a goal and 4 assists in 7 games is good, but you wanted more. This was the player brought in and presented to us as a Mikko Rantanen, not full-on replacement, right? But it's like, okay, this will help to make up for some of the production that's being lost in the absence of Rantanen. So you just wanted a little more.
I want to pull up this one because fans are a little harsh on him. I agree with this.
He's scapegoated a lot. It's not just Avs, it's Carolina too.
Yeah. I mean, it's just hard when you're comparing him to Mikko at all points in time. And this went the other way, of course, when the trade first happened and Mikko went to Carolina and he wasn't producing at all. Then everybody was comparing the two of them together, saying, look how well Marty is doing compared to how Mikko's doing. Now it's kind of switched, where people are now looking at the playoff performance that Mikko is having, and they're being really, really hard on Necas. So I don't think it's fair to do that.
I think the regular season returns for Necas too are important not to completely forget. For pyramid purposes, this is strictly playoffs, but for us just talking about him, he showed more in the regular season to get hopeful around, that I think he can still help the Avs. And you're right. The conversation we're having around Necas will be copied and pasted to a couple other players who we just wanted to see a little bit more from. So it's not entirely his burden to shoulder either. There's a lot of guys to share that blame around.
All right, let's take a look at the next one. Sam Girard, Sammy G. He's a little lower than last time, I think.
He might be.
I'm not very sure.
This is tough because similar to the jury penalty, a puck goes off Girard's skate on the Rantanen wraparound in Game 7, which helps them to complete a successful comeback. And you'll remember that. It's tough because I think that Girard had much better moments in the series than that singular incident suggests. He was top 5 in high danger chances for at 5v5. And so there was this frustration because we talk highly about both Sams and their puck skill, their puck movement, and their skating as being extensions of the Avs offense. So the criticism is, well, you didn't get the offense. And he had a goal and 2 assists. Averaged 17 minutes on a nightly basis, ate up big minutes on the kill, taking up some of the toughest matchups on the top unit for Dallas's power play on the kill on behalf of the Avs.
Mhm.
And so when I look at some of the adjustments that Dallas made throughout the course of the series, one of the things was to make it difficult for the Avs to exit and difficult for the Avs to break out the puck in transition. And having a player like Girard, I'll say this about Malinsky later too, improved the transition game. The possession numbers at 5v5 ended up dominant at the end of this series, but we'd have a different conversation if Girard wasn't in it, and Malinsky wasn't in it, and Taves, and Makar. And so it's easy to look at the lack of production from a player that is touted as this puck-moving defenseman, but I don't know that it's entirely fair to him, and I think that on the kill, he's better than people give him credit for, but the kill struggled on the whole. And I've kind of keyed in on individual performances that we'll get into, but I didn't think Girard was a huge reason as to why it suffered.
I agree. Somebody said, can't believe you do this to him right after his birthday. And that's so true.
I do feel bad.
Sorry. But at least he made the pyramid.
On his birthday too, Jesse and I are like, they could trade him. And
Yeah.
I just feel really bad about that because I have love for Sammy G.
Okay.
I think that his position, the small puck-moving defenseman, gets scapegoated a lot on all teams. It's not exclusive to the Avs. It's just a hard position to win over an audience with, and I think I just have to live with that.
I'm not gonna lie, I had a lot of recency bias for putting him where I did on the pyramid just because of that goal at the end of the series. It was unfortunate, but I do think that it was, I mean, it's kind of a bad mistake to make, to be in a position where your stick misses the puck and then it ends up going in. Like, that's just kind of what I think in my brain of, I feel like it has to be really hard to miss that.
Well, and is this on the Mikko
size?
goal? Sorry.
Yes.
The size. I think he's trying to cover that post because he sees that Mikko's going for the wraparound attempt, and Blackwood's pulled to the far post. So he's like, well, nobody's here except for me.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the odds are. Like, it's not 50-50 split, but the odds of him blocking that instead of it just going off of him in the series, again, there were a lot of weird bounces on both sides.
Yes.
So maybe those should have been the odds he operated off of. Like, well, usually this might not happen, but it's been happening a lot in this series. So maybe I should jump onto Mikko Rantanen's back.
Just ride him around.
And just ride him around for the rest of the series. Might take a penalty doing it, but the odds are better.
Amazing. But the way I wanted to finish that was, now that you'd say that, I don't want to blame him for that, because you're right. There's a lot of crazy bounces that happened. So that's all I have for him. Sorry, Sammy G. Happy birthday.
Sammy G. Happy birthday.
All right. Moving on. See how small Girard's picture is?
He is a little more distant from the others, but Marty's kind of distant too, so they're close. Lindgren's just very close.
He's super close, so you can see into his eyes. All right. Val. What do you have?
So it's very similar to my conversation around Marty Netchis. He has 3 goals and an assist. And so the goal scoring obviously has an impact. And I felt it came about a little later in the series, but it was still very necessary. And then there's aspects of Val's game that are always good and needed, like gritty wall work and puck protection. But that just really improves the possession bottom line. It's still not really helping the lack of goal scoring at 5v5 and, of course, on the power play. And so I've seen Val have a greater impact on a nightly basis in the regular season, when he's missed 6 months of hockey, when he's returning off injury. It doesn't even take him much time to shake off the rust. This is a player that, even at 80% capacity, still has the ability to help this team in a huge way. And so I felt he was just a little too neutral early in the series when they needed full Val. And he's still an important player. He still comes up with a few goals, but goodness, I was just left wanting a little bit more. I
expected so much more from him. And I thought he was going to be a huge force in this series, especially after how he's looked the past few postseasons. You just want to see more. And he was a big guy in helping Colorado get past Winnipeg last year. And I don't think we got to see actual playoff Val. It just didn't feel the same. And that could have been for any number of reasons. But I do want to say I'm very happy that he stayed with the team.
Yeah.
He didn't take a trip to player assistance program. And I think that shows a lot of growth from him. So I want to commend him on that, because I think he should be on the pyramid for that reason alone. I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, that is a huge page to turn in his book. So that's a really good call out. Cujo in the chat asked if this is a pyramid on who crashed, and it actually is still a little bit of both, because there are people not on the pyramid we'll get to at the end who fully crashed is dramatic, but who did not meet expectation. There are guys on here who fell below expectation. And so, for example, a guy like Jury being at the bottom of the pyramid is a good thing for him, I guess, right? Like, it's not because he did anything wrong. Whereas a guy like Val being this low on a pyramid is a problem, because that's a player that should be higher.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a case-by-case basis. But yeah, there's some pros and cons to each of these.
That's why I like having us do this consistently, because then you can look back at our past videos and see where everyone has been ranked before, and how it's changed drastically throughout the season. Like, I just think about Malinsky, because he was top, bottom, middle. He was moved all around. So I think that's a good way to see too, when you have a player that's been ranked really high all season, when they start to fall, you know exactly why.
Yes.
Okay. Josh Manson.
He had an interesting series.
Yeah.
2 goals and an assist, including a shorthanded goal, which was very timely. Opened up the scoring for them at a very necessary point. And he was physical throughout the series, the most physical defenseman with 24 hits, had a game-winning goal, and he led the team in giveaways. And so this is where that kind of happens with him, where his overall night doesn't feel like it was that bad, but then you look at the total number of giveaways, and he's sometimes in the higher category, especially in that period in the regular season where he returned from injury and he just wasn't making the best decisions with the puck. And so I'm not going to classify him as this total liability over the series, because I think he balanced that with that physical presence that I'm talking about that shined through in the series. On times on the kill, he would lay a big hit and gap up on his guy, and it would stifle a scoring or passing attempt on behalf of Dallas. And so I won't take away from what that physicality added in this series that was so necessary. He had that really great play too to Taves earlier in the series. So the interesting thing is that's where the puck skill matters with players like Manson. You want him to be the stay-at-home defenseman who is physical, but he still needs to have a little bit of puck skill. And so he had the second most shots among defensemen behind Makar. 18 pucks to the net. So I like that there was this initiative sent out to the whole of the D-Corps, just put pucks on net. He really absorbed that and implemented that. So I don't have a huge issue with Josh Manson coming out of the series.
Yeah. I think he brought a lot more than he normally does, especially when you look at the shots. I think you could tell that he really wanted one. And I'm happy he was doing that, because I think that was a struggle the entire series, was just try to get pucks on net. And I saw him doing that a lot out of most of the defensemen, except for Kale. Kale was really trying, but we'll talk about that. But yeah, I think he brought a lot of physicality. I think he brought toughness. And his goals were huge, especially goals. Did he have 2 or 1?
He had 2 goals.
He had 2. Okay. But the shorthanded one was huge. And I think that's a really key contribution to have a defenseman that can score a shorthanded goal like that.
Yes. No, I giggle, but it is important, right? Like, this is where a little bit of puck skill and a little bit of speed to join Logan O'Connor up ice is all really important. And not every big physical stay-at-home defenseman has all of those tools.
Yes. All right. Next, Sam Malinsky.
Sam Malinsky. It was his first ever NHL playoffs.
Yes.
And I thought he carried himself really well as the series went on. And there were tough moments, like the penalty, the Sam Steele elbowing penalty. That was not a penalty, right? In game 6, I want to say. Or game 5.
I think it was 5.
And it didn't seem like he let those moments sink into his confidence. It just continued to grow. So he averaged 14 minutes and he had 9 shots on goal, the third most among D. He had the fewest scoring chances against and shots against of all defensemen, despite the increased quality of competition with matchups over the series. Because as the series wore on, he kind of assumed more of a second pair role. It was a little interesting how each player was deployed, because players like Manson ate up big minutes on the kill, and so his overall time on ice at the end of a game would still clock in a bit higher. But with the increased quality of competition in some of those matchups, I think that Sam Malinsky, who's billed as an undersized defenseman, he wore a lot of that contact and he finished his hits. And I was really glad to see him take that step, especially in how he engaged physically, because, you know, he is coming from college, maybe described as a bit of a different player. And so I like that he also was putting pucks on net, and he'd walk the blue line in search of the right play and throw the puck on net. But sometimes he'd skate through traffic too and collect his own rebound. He had a huge block on the PK early in game 7, a Cody Ceci slap shot in the final seconds. And so he didn't really PK over the course of the series. But in game 7, an early PK, he gets in on the final seconds. And part of that is because of the speed and the puck skill that he possesses. There's this opportunity of, okay, when our guy comes out of the box, who do we trust to break out the puck and get a puck on a stick of our guy coming out of the box, right? There's a sense of trust and responsibility that is being issued to a player like Malinsky. That's why he's being put on the ice at the end of a kill. And I don't want to take away from how that shows where the trust was built up with Jared Bednar in a game 7, right? And so you're kind of looking at your tools that you have, and there's this trust that, all right, Malinsky's the guy, tape to tape, that can get this done. We want him on the ice in this moment. And so that's a small little tactical thing, too, that Bednar's looking at, but it also reflects really well on Sam Malinsky, who, as the series went on, I think showed a lot of maturity and poise. I think there's still so much room for growth, but I say that with so much respect for what I think the ceiling of this player is.
Yeah. Let's talk about how Bednar chose him to play over EJ, because I think that's a really big deal to, you know, to have somebody like Eric Johnson that has played many, many times in the playoffs with this team, for Bednar to choose him, Malinsky, and this being his first postseason. I almost said post-playoff season. I think that's a really, really big deal for such a young player.
I like Vapi Ballantyne. Small, not small. Malinsky was on the ice for 0 goals against. Defensively, I don't know that he gets a ton of credit. And some of it is, you know, you've got players like Makar and Theil on the ice for some of the toughest of toughest matchups. And so that is worth noting in talking about some of the favorable defensive analytics that come forward for a player like Malinsky. But it's also an area of his game that he's continued to just be more responsible in. And the EJ conversation, I think, is such a valuable one. There's a reason they brought him back. And I think that EJ played more than I expected him to, and he handled himself well in doing it. But when you looked at where Dallas was slowing Colorado down through the neutral zone, you needed more puck skill and you needed more speed, and that is Sam Malinsky. And so this goes back to the conversation with Gerard, too, that you wouldn't like this series if both of these players weren't in it. And so Malinsky improved the bottom line on the breakout, you know, so he registers a single assist on the 4v4 Valnichushkin goal, but he's directly responsible for the breakout on a Nathan MacKinnon goal in Game 6. And so, that's not going to register as even a secondary assist, but he's a huge part of the transition game for Colorado, and it's because of his unique toolkit.
Isn't that so unfortunate, though, that they could be the reason for the play and they won't even get a secondary assist?
Get credit. That's why our small puck-moving defenseman, I shouldn't say small because he's medium Sam, according to Jesse.
Right.
But this mold of defensemen, they take a lot of crap. They get scapegoated for a lot of things. And I think that's why it's good for us to do the pyramid and just kind of give Sam Malinsky some flowers.
I agree. All right. Next. Parker Kelly.
I think I had him
PK on the PK.
I wanted him to be so high in this pyramid.
Yeah, was that my fault?
No,
Did you have him
no,
higher?
I think I had him normal,
Okay.
in a normal place, but I was just trying to come up with reasons to put him even higher.
I love that.
He led all the skaters in hits and added energy and kind of sandpaper every shift. And again, this is my Jack Drury thing, but he took a lot of shit, okay? He tried to stay above it all, and he ate huge minutes on the kill. And when I think to individual performances on the PK that I didn't love, he is not one of those players that I just had a little bit of issue with. I think that by design, the Avs kill is not as aggressive, especially compared to Dallas's, but there are players who are a bit more aggressive on the kill, and Parker Kelly is one of them. Good lane management, and I think that he deserves a lot of credit for the series that he had. I think over time too, if he had made a deeper run, there would be so many more storylines linked to that fourth line, in the same way that we kind of talk about the St. Louis Blues series and the Darren Helm goal. I just think we would have had more fun narratives like that evolve over the span of a longer playoff run with players like Parker Kelly. He just does all the right things, and these are also his first playoffs. So,
oh gosh, that's crazy.
It's it's their first time living too.
Yeah.
This is Parker Kelly's first time living.
Yeah.
And he handled himself with grace.
Yeah, I have the same things to say that I did about Drury. I think they were all fantastic on that fourth line, and I agree. If they would have made a deeper run, we would have heard a lot more from that fourth line. They were just starting. That was the first series. Imagine what they could have done if they had made a deeper run. It would have been so cool to see. I really, really hope that we can recreate this fourth line next year.
Me too.
Me too.
He's physical and makes an impact, and he does it while not being what I consider a dirty player, from Alyssa in the chat. I agree. And I think the impact of working with Andrew Cogliano directly this year shined through, because the player that started coming out of camp with the Avs in Parker Kelly, one, he thought he was being brought here to be a fourth line wing, and he was asked to be a third line center. And he grew as a player over the course of the season. And so I think the version of Parker Kelly that we saw in the playoffs was born from some of that growth, working directly under Andrew Cogliano. And so I'm excited to see what the next year holds for him.
I really loved what he had to say when Jesse had asked him about Cogliano, and he was just saying he's learning so much from him. And I think he's such a good mentor to have when you're in that same position.
Yeah.
Okay. Gosh, I'm losing count of where I am in here. Parker Kelly. Okay. Devon Taves. Welcome to the pyramid.
Was he not on it?
No, he was.
Oh, okay. I like welcome to the pyramid. I just felt like
being dramatic.
No,
for that
I
one.
really like it. Devon Taves, step on up. I think he had the most blocked shots on the team. And this goes into why I like him in his own end, but on the kill generally. Manages his lanes well, getting sticks on passes and body in shot lanes. And he logged heavy minutes against the top matchups for Dallas and quietly drove possession.
Did Theil have the most and he had the second most?
This is for blocked, he blocked the shots, not that he was taking the shots.
Oh, no, for minutes.
Oh, minutes. I see 24-33 time on ice versus 26-48 for Theil.
Because I couldn't remember if he had the most. I was like, that's crazy.
his average came in just a little bit lower, but still pretty high. And Makar was really suffocated on the breakout with the way that Dallas aggressively forechecked. And Toews was a huge support to Makar on the breakout directly that helped to overcome that. And so I want to give Toews a lot of credit for the series that he had. I think he did a lot of things right. 3 assists and a goal for 4 points in 7 games. You know, I don't have much criticism of Toews coming out of this series. I really liked it.
Yeah. The biggest thing that I just want to point out is it seems like when Kale wasn't really there, he filled that role. And I can't remember what game it was when, you know, I could think it was game 5 or game 6. And you could tell just Kale just wasn't really there. You didn't feel it as hard because Toews stepped in. And I think that's a big thing to have from somebody. But yeah, he had right in the middle of the series, he had, 3 games. He had a point per game, which pretty steady production.
August is talking about one of the kills in particular that I hated the most. And it's because that cross crease pass is identical to one that Coyle let trickle through on a prior PK. And so Toews is also in that pass lane. There's a little bit of responsibility shared then between the two, but without spoiling too much, there's a reason Coyle has not come up in the pyramid yet. And I love Charlie Coyle, but we are going to talk about that exact play that you're talking about. I think Toews did more positive than bad on the kill, but that is a moment that springs to mind that was not his finest.
Okay. I keep losing where we are. There's so many people. All right, we're moving on to the next one. Artturi Lehkonen.
He's a tough one because he did all of the right things and was not getting rewarded for them. The 4th on the team for high danger chances for in all situations, tied with Devon Toews also at 40, which shout out to Devon Toews for trying to be a part of the creation process throughout the whole series too. But you can recall specific instances of Lehkonen on the doorstep of chances that were stifled by Jake Ottinger. And so it's hard for me to be critical of what appears to be all the right things process-wise, because like with a Netchus and with a Nichushkin, there appeared to be an execution issue, whereas with Lehkonen, it just felt like a little bit of bad luck,
Yeah.
And so I thought that he still did all of the puck retrieval, puck hound things that Lehkonen typically does. And maybe that's why he stands out as higher in this pyramid. I just wished it had translated more than it did, but I don't fault him, especially process-wise, for that being the case. But 3 goals and an assist and some timely goals too, which is a classic Lehkonen clutch move. So I'm happy with Lehkonen, just disappointed that he was very unlucky in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
He got that weird bicycle kick goal early in the series.
So that's what I was going to say.
And then all his luck was sucked away.
Yeah, something about that. He got really, really lucky with that one, and he got really lucky with that one.
He got really oh my gosh. Unlucky.
But yeah, he had a lot of really, really good looks. They just weren't hitting the back of the net. And there's just not much you can do. If it's not working for you, then it's not. And I don't blame him for that. I think he was really, really good this postseason. So that's why he's so high up.
He should have also gotten on Mikko Rantanen's back with Sam Girard.
Mikko has to hold Girard in one hand, Lecky in the other one, and just keep skating.
Keep skating, see what happens.
Perfect. Okay. Moving on. Kale. So I actually had Kale a little bit lower. No offense to Kale. See, this is just what sucks about this because, how many times has Kale been our number 1? The very top of the pyramid. I think 3 or 4 times. That's just a really tough way to end the season for him. But what I am going to say about this is I just don't think he was his usual self. But even what?
Kale looks a bit grumpy to not be at the top.
He should be. But the power play would have looked a lot different if he was able to convert on a few of those. If there was just one that went in that wasn't his empty net goal, I think that maybe would have jump-started a little bit of something for him, but he just didn't look like himself. But the reason why he's so high on the pyramid is that even his like average okay performance, I think, is still a lot better than a lot of other players' normal performance.
I agree with that. No, I do. It's hard. It's hard to be hard on Cale Makar. You know, he's a player that left you wanting because you know what he's capable of. But we talked about the ice time, leading the team, and leading the team in minutes and contending with top matchups in the process and trying to break through a Dallas game plan that was quite literally designed to stifle him, and trying to work through that over the course of this series while also trying to be sound defensively. And he led the team in takeaways per 60, and so he was aggressive. He also led the team in missed shots, and so execution plagued him over the course of this series. He's throwing everything, though, but the kitchen sink at Ottinger, at Dallas, 26.
See, but I like that. A lot of people didn't like that. I mean, because he was missing, but
and
I think it's like better to do that.
You still, because you're missing, but you also still come away second on the team in shots on goal. And so, you're missing a lot of shots, but you're also still putting a lot on net. The volume is just kind of insane. And so it's frustrating that execution was a bit of an issue, but there were pucks getting to the net. And over the course of the series, I think that Cale started to work around some of the ways that Dallas tried to shut him down specifically. And so he was starting to look more like himself, but they ran out of runway, you know?
Yeah.
It's a shame that this is decided in 7 games. But we started to get more of his best near the end. And look, the weird stick break on the power play and then just trying to defend a breakaway without a stick, that's weird. I'm not even holding it against him. I'll make mention of it so that people know we're aware that happened. But it's hard to be hard on Cale Makar. I don't expect this to be, this feels like an isolated incident. This is an anomaly in the career of Cale Makar. And so I'm not going to ever bet against him. I'm sad that this happened at a time when he was needed most, but I still think, exactly like you said, Cale Makar not 100% at his best is still a pretty darn good player.
I want to bring up this comment too. Cale probably already fixed whatever he did wrong. Such high expectations for him, and the playoffs are brutal because opposition targets the highest threats. Yeah, this is exactly what you were saying. Whatever it was that happened, he's probably already way, way past it.
And in a way that, too, he's probably also beating himself up. This is a player that's so hard on himself and carries a lot of guilt and responsibility for when things go wrong that aren't his fault. If he even feels there's a chance it's his fault, it's going to probably be baggage he carries into next season, but in a way I expect is productive. So I don't necessarily want him to carry the shame of this exit over the course of his summer, but I imagine it will be a lot of motivational fuel for him next year.
I want to bring this one up too. Cheers, y'all. Love the show.
Thanks, August.
Cheers. Thank you for watching. Okay. I think we were here. Next. Landy makes his debut to the pyramid. Yay! How exciting.
It's bittersweet. You said it perfectly at the start of the show that he makes his return, after 3 years of missing time. And there was this hope, I'm sure, for himself that he'd be playing a lot more hockey in the process. Like, wait a minute, I just got back. I was just getting started.
Yeah.
And I imagine he feels a little bit like that. But this team markedly improved when he returned. The possession, bottom line, improved. So whether he was on that third line role or elevated to the second line role, the possession numbers 5v5 were only made better because he didn't shy away from being Landeskog of before. He brought that heavy forechecking presence, retrieving pucks, and I think that probably, I won't say it surprised Dallas necessarily, but I think he was such a question mark in the series that having just the emotional impact too of getting a leader back like Landeskog and then seeing him still try to assert himself at the net front and improve the line that he was on by not only improving the possession numbers, but bringing energy to it. Just the way that he plays kind of makes you want to battle right there alongside with him because he's not leaving anything on the ice. And that's why he's so high in the pyramid. And I'm just glad to see he averaged 17 minutes a night in his return to play and handled second line matchups in his return to play. All of that is something to be incredibly proud of and to build on some optimism going into next year.
I mean, I don't think that this return could have gone any better for him. I mean, I was just blown away at what he ended up bringing to the team. You know, there was a lot of worry about, you know, him shaking off some rust and not knowing how much he was going to get involved, but he came back with the same exact intensity and the leadership that he had when he left. I always get ahead of my words because I
say weird stuff all the time, Chloe.
But yes, I'm very happy that that he was able to rejoin the team. And yes, it was disappointing that they weren't able to make a deep run with him this year, but I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon.
Okay, now to be dramatic for a second. Should they have brought him back in game 2?
I think so. A lot of people said if they brought him back in game 2 or in game 1, that this series would have looked a lot differently.
Game 2 is where Miles Wood, who came in to the lineup on that third line because Raskol was hurt and had the mistake at the end of the overtime that lost them the game. And so now I'm playing incredible revisionist history here. Like, okay, well, if Landeskog is playing, does that even go to overtime? Does that same mistake happen? But here's the important thing to consider. Because it would have been his first playoff game, they wouldn't have been able to control matchups with last change in Dallas. And there might have been concern on like Bednar/Gabe's side of it. You know, we need to just approach this with a little bit of caution.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have been afforded that in game 2. In hindsight, it's easy to point to it and say, well, he obviously was fine. Come on, guys. Come on. Okay, go back in time and change it.
I wish they could have. A lot of people are saying in the chat he's going to be on the first line next year. What do you think?
I think it's really possible.
Me too.
I think it's really possible.
It's just so exciting. I'm just like, myself, I'm excited, but really I'm just excited for him. Like, this is just such a big deal.
You're so right. If there's one thing to be excited about in this kind of grim pyramid, it's the fact that Landy's on it.
Yeah. And somebody, like, I think there was one person in the chat saying that he should have been higher. He should have been number 1. I thought about it.
I thought about it too. I did too.
So just want to point that out. All right. Moving up. Nathan MacKinnon.
The dog. One of the dogs. Since apparently there's many.
Since there's 3.
I don't know what to say. Nate did a lot of Nate things, you know? Led the team in points, had 2 game-winning goals. All of the power play goals. Drove the offense with 39 shots. Another player who, by design, Dallas's game plan, tried to shut down and was a little more successful in finding a way around it. 7 goals, 4 assists. 11 points in 7 games and scores in a game 7, which he had yet to do. So it's just like, it's hard to ask more of Nathan MacKinnon. Doesn't mean I won't still try, but it's hard to ask more.
Yeah. What I love about Nate in the playoffs is that you can really see the fire in him, and he gets all amped up. He's more willing to like mix it up, and you can see the intensity in his eyeballs.
Yeah, it's kind of scary.
I think that like he has that sort of anger that can fuel his game, but I don't think he fully channeled it. Like in those last few games, I think he could have used it.
More angry Nate,
but using angry Nate to your team's advantage. It was there, but I just don't think it connected with the rest of the group the way that it should have, that it could have, in order to fuel the rest of the team. I think that could have been a huge game changer.
I am still processing the fact that they only scored 3 times on the power play and 22 chances, and they were all Nathan MacKinnon.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a bummer again. Can we go back to Landy for a second?
Oh, okay. Second on the pyramid, Mackenzie Blackwood.
Mackenzie Blackwood.
First playoff performance. Crazy.
Yeah, so as of today, with the second round in full swing, and I added a qualifier that goaltenders in this evaluation must have at least played 60 minutes. So I'm not counting anybody who came in as relief briefly.
Yeah.
He still has the third best high danger save percentage and the third most high danger goals saved above expected. I think that's pretty impressive, and I'll leave it at that in my assessment of his play over the series. Dallas did a lot to make things hard for the Avs too, in talking about Kale throwing everything but the kitchen sink at them. Dallas was there too, and they were getting denied a lot of opportunities, and Mackenzie Blackwood was a huge part of that. And for it being his first playoffs and managing the emotional swing, high to low, of playing the same team every other day or so, right? It's challenging, and the intensity is that much higher, and I thought he was really composed.
I'm just... I was just looking at Alyssa's
I just have
comment.
to have faith that you didn't put Mikko on the top of the pyramid.
That will make me crash out.
I'm not sure if you'll...
Then we'll have to put Alyssa on the top of the crash out pyramid.
Ooh, I like crash out pyramid.
Yeah, not a lot to say for me about Mackenzie Blackwood. I think he was really, really consistent. And when it was so back and forth in that series, and you know, that's a really hard job to do. And I think he did a phenomenal job, considering that was his first playoffs.
Yeah.
And this is the series that he went in.
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't even imagine what that pressure would feel like, first of all, but then to not only play in your first playoffs, but then to play in your first game 7. The stakes are so high. And he just, you know, he was so calm. Cool as a cucumber.
Cool as a cucumber.
That little Blackwood.
That little Mackenzie. I've always wanted his nickname to be Mackie B, but I don't think anyone would ever call him that. Mackie B.
What's Mackie B? Why do I don't
know if it's anything. It just feels right to me.
feel like I've heard somebody with that nickname before.
Hopefully nothing bad.
Okay.
Yay.
We've made it to the top of the pyramid. Everybody go into the comments and tell us who you think it is at the top of the pyramid. There's a lot of people that didn't get included, so you probably have a pretty good guess, or maybe you don't.
Jesse's so mad. Jesse's physically in the building now.
He mad? No! Did we lock the door so Jesse can't come in? Here it is. Yay!
Caitlin called it. Mayor of Denver. Obviously, it's Logan O'Connor.
Obviously. How could we ever pick anybody else? Jesse is right. Come on, guys. This is what we said. How many opportunities could we possibly have to put Logan O'Connor at the top of the pyramid?
And I know that maybe to some is like, that doesn't seem like a good enough reason, but there is real reason why he's there.
Is a ton of reason.
2 goals and 4 assists, 6 points. He scores a shorthanded goal. He helps to create the opportunity for the Josh Manson shorthanded goal. It opened up the scoring in game 7.
Mm-hmm.
He was relentless on the forecheck, high energy, physical presence, a player who makes very few mistakes every shift. He's consistent in that sense. To get that kind of production in a series where goals were hard to come by on the whole, it's really impressive. And you want to talk about a player who played above expectation, going back to my earlier comments about you needed guys to be at their best version and you just got the okayest version of guys. Mm-hmm. Well, you got supercharged Logan O'Connor.
Yeah. I mean, I've never seen anything like that. I mean, I don't know what he had in him this series, but we need more of that. Every single pyramid, all I remember saying about him was I like him a lot. I think he's so consistent, and I think he's gritty, and he's a hard worker, but we were always missing the output of it. You know, you could tell that he was doing a really good job, but you didn't see it on the score sheet, and now you're seeing it. It's finally connecting, and I think that's a really good reason to have him on the top of the pyramid. Him and Mackenzie Blackwood, he was a close second.
Yeah.
I think both of them were the two best players in this series. But I think, not that it's more impressive for Logan O'Connor, but I just think that there was more from him that made me want to put him at the top of the pyramid. I hope that makes sense.
Says LSU was the best player this series, memes aside. Thank you, Leon.
Memes aside.
Who would Jesse have put at number 1?
Yeah, Jesse. Who?
Nate. Don't get me wrong, Nate's our 3, so it's not like we're like disgusted by this.
I don't know. I had a pretty disgusted face when he said that. I mean, I see it. Like, this is what's hard about when you get to the top of the pyramid, because this whole thing is hard. We found it really hard throughout the season to only pick 15 players. Sometimes it's really hard to do. So when you get up to the top 3, they can be interchangeable. So maybe Jesse's would have been different, and maybe so would everybody else's. But Nate.
But ours is perfect. So
this one's perfect. But Jesse didn't want to do the pyramids, so he doesn't get to.
Yeah. Chap it. No, you're right. It's more impressive for someone so far down the totem pole to be so impactful compared to some L2 passengers.
Thank you.
Chap. Right. Nate did Nate things. Logan O'Connor also did Nate things. Yes. That's maybe a bit crazy to say, but you know what? I said it. All right. We're going to wind down because we are going.
See, how did we do this?
We are going long.
I thought that without Jesse that this would be so much shorter. And here we are at an hour and 11 minutes. Oops.
We got to talk about our dishonorable mentions.
Yeah.
Okay, we already said our honorable mention to Scott Wedgwood, just making sure that was addressed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel good about this, but let's just start. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off.
I hope everybody feels the bad vibes that are happening right now.
Yeah, this was always what the pyramid was supposed to be too, but then we just were like, wait, I don't think I want to roast anybody.
Whoever didn't make it. Yeah.
Joel Kiviranta. 0 points. 9 shots on goal. He was a former playoff hero against Colorado in the past, and he offered very little spark this time around. He averaged just over 10 minutes per game, and he had 20 hits, but it translated to no tangible offensive contribution. That line was kind of a black hole. And so on a team desperate for bottom 6 scoring anywhere, literally any time, his lack of production stood out.
I'll give the one that I was considering putting at the very bottom of the period for me. Period. Brock Nelson. He didn't fill the 2C spot. It was actually pretty disappointed that you didn't really get to see him turn it on in playoffs. But I know this was something that you and Jesse talked about yesterday. It doesn't seem like he wants to stay in Colorado. So that's unfortunate that maybe that kind of translated into his play in the playoffs. So that's why he didn't make the pyramid.
I am going to be cute and say that his performance was inoffensive. Like, he wasn't really a liability, but it was inoffensive in that he didn't help them offensively in any way. Okay, 4 assists.
Right.
But it was expected of a 2C. And so the lack of an offensive impact, which again, this affected a lot of players beyond just him, but it really hurt them in a way they couldn't afford. And that's why he fell outside the pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Charlie Coyle. Because I'm a big Charlie Coyle supporter.
Yeah.
He was acquired for his 2-way game, but he struggled to make an impact both offensively and defensively. He was a player that stood out to me in a bad way on the kill. And I typically think of him as a responsible player there, but I don't think he managed his lanes well. I think he got caught in no man's land a couple times, and it cost them. At least 2 instances come to mind in a big way with a puck in the back of the net. He was good in the faceoff dot, so that continued to be a consistent part of his game. But for a third line that lacked energy, this was a player that I hoped would bring it, and I think losing Ross Colton really didn't do them any favors in that sense. But I was hoping for Coyle, a player that I think is cast a little bit below his former role in Boston as a third line player that, has seen top 6 minutes in the past. For him to have been cast just a little below that role and not thrive there hurt my heart a little bit. So I liked his regular season fit. I'm not voting him off the island. I just didn't love his playoffs.
You know what's so unfortunate about this is that going into the playoffs, I think I told my brother and my dad and some of my friends, like, watch Charlie Coyle.
He was on a tear at the end of the year.
At the end of the season, he had 11 points in the last 6 games of the regular season. I was so excited for what he was going to do in the playoffs. He was just getting really, really hot. And then he had a goal in the first game of this series. But after that, it just completely fell off.
A great goal, too. Set up from Jack Drury, our little baby bird who woke up from his nap at the bottom of the pyramid. And he had the best D-zone face-off win percentage of any of the players. So who was it in the chat? Midnight Gobble. You are so correct. He did win some big face-offs in their own end. So I don't want to not say that. 64.1% for D-zone draws.
All right. Jonathan Drouin.
Okay. I know we have some listeners specifically who love Drouin, so this hurts.
I'll start with this. I'll start positive. In the 3 power play goals, Drouin had 3 assists. He had an assist on all 3 of those power play goals. So, not all bad, but
he was picked apart, and it wasn't just him, but he was picked apart on the power play, just to be specific in what I mean by that. So I'm glad that he had the 3 power play points, but he really struggled to overcome what Dallas's kill did so well to stop the Avs from creating the way that they'd like on the man advantage. And that was gapping up on him at the half wall. And he would get stuck there and just have to cough up the puck and the play would just kind of die there. And it sucked because this is a player with a little more in his toolkit that I think he could have overcome that a bit better. I think in the same way that we saw comments in the chat, people are really hard on Netchess and his playoff performance. I think people will be very hard on Jonathan Drouin.
Yeah.
And when he was healthy, he was having a great regular season, point per game, just really impactful when he was in the lineup. And it sucked that he was dealing with injury as much as he did. So it affected our evaluation of him in a contract year, right? He took such a team-friendly contract that was always kind of expected that this is just a waiting place for his next deal. Mm-hmm. And he just didn't get the opportunity to make a great case for himself because these playoffs were not his best showing. He gets assigned a line lower than he's used to typically playing, and I don't think he fit the identity of that line naturally, and it was just not a place that he thrived. The losing the battle against Mikko Rantanen in OT loss, I think stood out to me because this is a player that has improved that side of his game, and where this flaw showed was at the worst time. And then this is a player too, I think, is typically good between the blue lines, and so he can be aggressive in his back check and stop even an entry before they reach the defensive blue line. And I didn't see that from him in this series, and that disappointed me because they needed it to slow Dallas down a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so I just didn't feel like we really saw full Jonathan Drouin, not as I'm used to seeing him.
I want to look at this too. He probably goofed at the wrong time, and we're all thinking of that while he comes back asking for a raise.
I think that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
I really like Jonathan Drouin. I think he's a great hockey mind and a great teammate. So I don't know what the future holds. I still think there's a future in Colorado, but the number for what a next contract look like is probably directly impacted by this year.
Yeah. Probably have to take a little bit of a discount.
Yeah. You took a chance on yourself. It didn't totally pay off. And look, some of that's outside of your control with the weird injuries that you battled over the course of the regular season. Yeah. But it is what it is.
It was just a rough year for him altogether.
Yeah.
And that's a really unfortunate year to have before you need to re-sign with the team.
And there you have it, folks. There are our dishonorable mentions. That was very painful.
And Mikko.
And Mikko. We didn't even mention, I wasn't even thinking about Miles Wood.
Yeah, I felt like there was not even a reason to mention him because there was, once Landy came back, there was just no reason why he would be anywhere close to that team.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. But that's just how it goes. I mean, he just not that he got the short end of the stick, but you know, it was kind of debated on who Landy was going to go in and out for.
Right.
And it happened to be Miles Wood, but Landy also ended up playing every single game, and he didn't need a game off. So, in turn, Miles just didn't get to play. Just kind of how it happens.
Well, there's our final playoff pyramid for the Avs for the season. Honorable mention, Ross Colton's 1-game performance. I am so sad that
Poor Ross Colton.
His groin exploded. That sucks.
I hate the way that you said that.
I'm so
His
sorry.
groin exploded?
Yeah. That's the medical diagnosis. I'm kidding.
Wait,
I'm
that's
kidding.
what the doctor
No,
said?
that's not. I think it's getting worse.
Bednar, his groin, it
It
exploded.
exploded, which also then made that's okay. First of all, that's not how this has been talked about at any point, but it seemed like he was gonna appear in a second round if they got that far.
Yeah.
Because he was getting closer and closer, just obviously not available for them in round 1.
Yeah.
I don't know that it would have made the difference if he had returned.
I don't think it would have.
They would have needed, in the same way that we got supercharged Logan O'Connor, they would have needed some supercharged version of Ross. That's not to insult Ross. It's just you had too many guys being just okay.
Yeah.
This is the okayest pyramid that we've ever done.
Yeah.
And that makes me a little sad.
I know. Well, we want to do more period. Why do I keep saying period? We want to do more pyramids, but we want to change it up so it's based on like vibes. Worst injuries.
Weirdest injury.
Weirdest injuries. So if anybody has an idea for a pyramid, then let us know, because that would be really, really fun to do in the off season, to have pyramids still, because this is a fun thing to do. He pulled his groin, which I'm sure feels like an explosion.
I think you're right, Alyssa.
Sucks.
Ross did bring energy. That was sorely lacking in the third line. That is, I mean, that's a different show, but that is an area of the lineup that I hope
Tears of
they
replacements.
reconsider. Yeah. Well, I'm going to cry some tears.
Yeah.
Anyways, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Pucks and Prosecco. But before I go, I want to remind you guys about who to call before the summer storms roll in. That's right, hailstorms. You got to worry about them starting this time of year. You never know when and where the hail will hit when the summer storms come. And the last thing you want to do is be caught scrambling when it does. So make the call before the storm. Call Accurate America. They'll partner with you on navigating insurance and provide quick, professional, and knowledgeable service using the latest technology and 3D modeling. And their work is guaranteed as long as you own your home. Don't scramble at the last minute. Call Accurate America at 303-900-ROOF before the storm. All right, you guys, we'll be back with Off Ice on Friday. Hang in there. Bye. Bye.